Hey everybody, welcome to 3D6 Charge, a podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k and the state of the game. In community news, we are streaming live at twitch.tv/3d6charge every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Where you can follow and subscribe, and we're also anywhere that you can find podcasts such as Spotify or iTunes. This is episode lucky number 13, getting max value from your stratagems. I'm your host Chris Vo, and joining me today is Benjamin Rubenstein.
Hello everyone.
And nominally we're supposed to have Omar as well, but once again he's running late, so I'm sure he'll drop in the next 30 minutes or so. But as the title of the episode suggests, we're going to be talking about getting the max value out of your stratagems, which ones you should avoid, which ones you should use, when you should use them. So we'll get into that in the next 10 minutes or so. But we want to just talk about real quickly the results from a GT from over the weekend. Let me bring up the thinger here. This is the Varberg GT. I actually don't know where this was in the world. Where's Varberg?
I am not sure.
Okay. Well, in either case, if you could have guessed, first place is Salamanders, because why wouldn't it be? But it's a little bit different. I'll give it that.
It's a little different. It is different. But it's still Space Marines, so don't get too excited.
It's still Space Marines. So it's a patrol of Salamanders and then a vanguard of White Scars, which is the interesting part. If it was just all Salamanders, then whatever. It's like every fucking Salamanders list that you've seen in 9th edition so far. And
if it was all White Scars, that would also be not very surprising. But the mix between the two is cool.
Yeah, especially considering that they're giving up the super doctrines for both of them, which isn't. I feel like it isn't make or break, especially when you consider the units that he's taking in the White Scars detachment. So if you're unfamiliar with the White Scars super doctrine, in the assault doctrine you get +1 damage in melee. But seeing as he's taking Blade Guard veterans with their Mastercrafted power swords, you're already at 2 damage. So going from 2 damage to 3 damage, it isn't as drastic a jump as it is going from 1 damage to 2 damage. One's a Primaris killer, one's not, basically. And then the Salamanders portion of this, it's exactly what you think it's going to be, with the exception of the aggressors. They didn't bring the flamers. They brought the Boltstorm gauntlets, which, considering, again, they lost their Salamander super doctrine, which is +1 to wound for Flame and Melta, right?
Correct. Yep, that's the super doctrine.
Yeah, so he's not losing a lot from dipping out on the Flamer gauntlets.
Yeah, I think the bolt gun gauntlets are, generally speaking, better unless you're Salamanders. And even then, if you're not getting the super doctrine, I don't think the stratagems to max your shots are even then worth it. Unless you're without the +1 to wound, it's just a lot weaker.
Yeah. Let's see, and we also see, Plasma Inceptors. Looks like Omar is 5 minutes away. Cool. I just realized I also just publicly broadcast my Facebook page. Cool. Good job. Anyway, it's an interesting take on what we've been seeing so far. I mean, some of it isn't surprising, like Grav Devs in a drop pod and then Eradicators.
Yeah, I would argue that nothing in this list is surprising, except for the fact that it's all appearing in the same list.
Yeah, that's really the interesting part of it.
Half of the two, I would argue, are the best lists in the game right now, and he just kind of put them together, and turns out it's also a very good list. Couple things that kind of jumped out at me. We're really low on OBSEC in this list. We did not take the Warlord trait on the captain that lets him give things OBSEC. So neither the captain nor the aggressors can gain OBSEC. Although the captain is toughness 7, so completely impossible to kill. And then Other than that, Blade Guard vets are kind of showing up everywhere because it's a Marine unit that's very good at killing other Marine units. It's also pretty resilient to the aggressor shooting that we're kind of seeing everywhere.
Yep.
And then at the same time, with 3 wounds, it's fairly resilient to a lot of the 2 damage weapons that people are bringing to kill Marines. So yeah, it's nothing really wild happening here. But the decision to kind of split up the super doctrine's cool.
Yeah, it's definitely just that in and of itself is interesting. That's what, that's the main thing I want to point out about this first place list. Second place is Chaos Demons, pure Chaos Demons.
I love this list. This list is so exciting to me.
Yeah. So one of the things that really shown to me was this guy brought 18 Beasts of Nurgle.
Yeah, so that unit, for those of you who don't know what a Beast of Nurgle is, because who does, is a unit that sort of has the classic 8th edition problem of it was in an early codex, so GW pointed it like 60 points, and then every chapter approved, they'd like taken 10 points cost off of it, and it's like still bad, so the next chapter approved comes around, like, oh, it's still bad, take 10 more points off of it. Like, eventually they just got to the point where it's not good still for like doing anything other than being points efficient for the number of wounds it has, but it's really points efficient for the number of wounds it has.
Now it is, yeah. I just wish that when they did their points drops that they also did like the actual dollar drop, because these things are $44 for one model.
Yeah, but they are 5 wounds at toughness 5 with the classic Nurgle defense line, so 5 up invulnerable save with 5 up heal no pains. They also can heroically intervene. Like,
all of them can heroically intervene,
which like it just gets people. I've actually done a fair amount of testing with Beasts of Nurgle. Because if Chaos Demons are going to be playing 9th edition, you got to be durable with something, and all your troop choices have been nerfed to the sky. So it's Beasts of Nurgle. And so yeah, they heroically intervene. They're also kind of choppy. They're D6 attacks at strength 4 or strength 5 if they're next to a herald. They reroll all their wound rolls.
Yep. 2 damage.
2 damage, so they're killing Primaris Marines if they're in a pre-Nurgle attachment, which they're not here. They can do 3 damage and 6s, although that's not happening here. And they're unbelievably tanky. It's like 600 points for like 180 wounds.
Especially when you do the math on disgustingly resilient. Like a 5-up feel no pain gives you 50% more effective wounds. So each one of these Beasts of Nurgle, when you take into account that feel no pain, it says 5 wounds on the data sheet. Realistically, like when you math it out, it's more like 7.5 wounds.
Yeah, you could also think of it more like a 4-up invulnerable save instead of a 5-up. It's very silly. Also keep in mind that they can dish out mortal wounds now with a stratagem. It's not super efficient. It's like 4 mortal wounds for a full unit, but if fighting something like Custodes, that's like very effective. And it'll come up. The 2 damage means that your Salamander's opponent can't get +1 on their saves. And they're also on really big bases, so the fact that they don't have OBSEC isn't always super important, because they can just physically be in the way of your opponent of being within 3 inches of the objective. The footprint on that unit is colossal. They take up more space than a knight, not close.
Yeah.
Other things that are in this list that are really neat. So he took this is the first time we've seen an Exalted Order change do really well. The damage output on an Exalted Order change is pretty good. Not like out of the world, but it's good. So this one was Bolt of Change, which is a targeted smite, but the warp charge is 8 because it's a Tzeentch spell, and most of them are really bad. Treason of Tzeentch, which is a spell I suspect he put on the Lord of Change and then never actually used. It goes off on a 9. You pick an enemy character, you roll 2d6, and you beat their leadership, and then you control them for the rest of the turn. The chances of all these things actually happening are like very low. And then Infernal Gateway, which is people know it more from Thousand Suns, so it was actually first printed in the Tzeentch Demon book, which is like the Mortal Wound Bomb, where they do D3 mortal wounds to the nearest enemy model, and every unit within 3 inches of that model then takes D3 mortal wounds, and then it goes off on a high enough number. It's a 12 up, it does D6 instead. So he's kind of scary. He does some mortal wounds. He's like okay in melee. He's actually worse than a Demon Prince in melee, funnily enough. But he's not like that's a high bar, so he's not bad. And his big thing is he's just unbelievably hard to move. He's got 16 wounds on a 3-up invulnerable save. His Warlord trait is in corporal form, so he's -1 damage to be taken. He's got Aura of Mutability, which is a 6-up Feel No Pain that every time he succeeds at the end of the attack sequence, he then heals a wound. So yeah, he's just shooting at him or attacking him is almost a waste of time with how durable the model is. So it's sort of just something that's going to be there basically to the end of the game, unless your opponent is putting things in them. And if your opponent's putting damage into him, it's not putting damage into the Beasts of Nurgle, which are just like holding presumably a third, 2/3 of the board.
Yeah, I mean they're on 60 millimeter bases, and there's 2 units of 9 of them. Like they're just they're boxing you out. And if you try to pull shenanigans and get close to them, they just heroically intervene into you.
Yeah, this list is taking up a huge amount of the board. There's also 3 10-man squads of Plague Bearers, 2 3-man Nurgling squads. There's also an Exalted Flamer in here, which is like, did he just have 60 points and he bought an Exalted Flamer?
That one's a little interesting. What's interesting to me is the Screamers.
Yeah, so Screamers are GW really wants them to be this like anti-tank unit. They have in Age of Sigmar they have anti-tank rules or anti-monster rules, and they gave them like anti-tank stratagems in Psychic Awakening. At the end of the day, they don't have enough attacks. Their weapon skills 4-up. They're only strength 6. They just like don't have the ability to be an anti-tank unit. But what they do is they move 16 inches,
which is nuts.
Which is a ridiculous movement speed. Makes a lot of the secondaries really trivial. Push out deep strikes super easily. Hello, Omar. You can push out deep strikes very easily. Doing secondaries like engaging all fronts, things like that. It's like a 78-point squad for 3 of them, which is still really expensive. But yeah, I guess the 4 inches movement over the Furies is what did it for him. Because Furies are only 45 points, and he does have a squad of Furies as well. Furies also have the infantry keyword, so they can do those like infantry only actions. And the fact that they move 12 inches and they can do actions is also a pretty big deal.
Yep, and I mean interestingly enough, he's also got the 266 reinforcement points. What do you think he's
so he can summon Demons of Tzeentch and Demons of Nurgle with that.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised. I ran a list with a bunch of reinforcement points at Nova, and the most often things I did with my reinforcement points was I summoned whatever was giving my opponent the worst trouble that was already in the list, like whatever my opponent couldn't like kill. So if you're playing against someone who's like, oh man, like Beasts of Nurgle are just an absolute pain, you're like, well, I'm going to summon 5 more of them. I did that at Nova. I brought 60 Plague Bearers, and I played against 3 different Tau lists, and against all of them, I just summoned 30 more Plague Bearers, which is just the end of the game because a Tau list could never ever kill 90 Plague Bearers back when they were -2 to be hit.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, it's the summoning points. He could also summon more spellcasters if he wants to get like a smite spam battery going. You could summon like a bunch of Flux Masters. He could summon some other Nurgle's got a bunch of weird heralds that give them like random abilities. There's a herald that lets Nurglings advance and charge within 6 inches of themselves. So depending on deployment, he could definitely like turn 1, like advance some Nurglings and then have his Nurgle character be deployed on the line, summon that character, and then basically have a unit of Nurglings 24 inches away from his front line be able to advance and charge on turn 1. Tie up something that thought it was super safe because Nurglings don't move very far normally. Mm-hmm. You can also neat trick. You do your actions. Most actions happen at the end of the movement phase. So if you don't have your Furies in a place where they can move 12 inches and get onto an objective, but you have a character starting within 12 inches, you can actually summon a demon character onto the objective and then have them do the action, or a demon, anything really. So you can like summon another unit of Furies to like do your action if your actual unit of Furies on the table is not close enough to the place that you want to be doing your action.
Yeah, no, that's pretty interesting. I had just thought that like he would have summoned like either more like Plague Bearers or they're going to be annoying, or just summoning in like horrors and then doing that Overwatch thing where like you kill like a pink and then you split it into blues and get closer.
Yeah, I actually think that if you're looking to like shoot at your opponent with demons, he's probably I guess you could do horrors for that, although I think if you're trying to charge into melee, you're probably more just like summoning a big blob of Plague Bearers.
I mean, I didn't say it was a good idea. I was just saying it was one that came to mind.
He also has the option to summon a max squad of flamers with that many reinforcement points, which are heinously killy. I'm playing a crusade league right now. I have a max size squad of flamers in my crusade. I'm playing mono Zinch demons, and those flamers are easily my MVP. I'm a Lord of Change, but like those flamers are definitely the scariest thing in the list. They move really far. They shoot unbelievably hard. They have a stratagem that makes them do on average 5 mortal wounds per shooting phase.
Wow.
And being able to point at like a custode squad and being like 2 of them are dead before you roll saves is like really stupid.
That feels a little unfair.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know it just gives you a lot of flexibility. I think that almost every demon list or chaos list should be bringing maybe probably 250, 260 summoning points. It just gives you a lot you can do.
A lot of flexibility. Yeah. I mean, I think it was Josh Theth at one of the majors, the super majors, where he just had like 1,000 reinforcement points, and he just had like a huge magna rack of just every demon possible, and it worked out pretty well for him.
Yeah, I did that. Like I said, I did that. I didn't do quite as well. I did that at Nova though. I brought, I think, 400 summoning points.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the list felt really strong. The summoning points like made the list. I think that most chaos demon lists are going to be bringing a large number of summoning points. It gives you so much flexibility.
Yeah, so it just goes to show you that even though we ranked Chaos Demons pretty low on our tier list last week, like if you're a good player and you have a solid game plan, anything is viable. Unless you're
this list is pretty sick. And he's definitely playing to the meta. Like he's looked at aggressors and is like, "Where aggressor? What's the thing in the demon codex? The aggressors are just the worst at killing, and it's Beasts of Nurgle." So he brought 18.
Yep. So let's move on to the third place list. It's Blood Angels. I mean, it's if you think of what would a Blood Angels player bring, he brought it. Yeah, he brought it. The only thing that like doesn't normally stand in like your quote unquote traditional Blood Angels list is the units of 3 Eradicators, and but I mean, with how they're pointed right now, if you have a heavy support slot, you're bringing Eradicators. So
yeah, and like that makes their bang for buck Eradicators in a lot of ways are the new Eliminators. But what I really like about this list is he went pretty hard on the Death Company.
That Death Company
did. Holy shit!
It's the
5 Thunderhammers
thing of every seed. Yeah,
and like, listen, this is how I run my Blood Angel. I always bring a blob of Death Company with 5 Thunderhammers, and you know what? I've never regretted it. Especially so he's got Asterath as his HQ.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, so he's a flying chaplain who gives so many rerolls on top of
full rerolls to Death Company, right?
I think he gives full rerolls to Death Company. I'm surprised he didn't bring Lamarties, because Lamarties also gives him a reroll to charge. But I think that's like a choice thing, and I'm not sure what an Asterath, if I remember correctly, can actually do 2 or 3 litanies. So he's a beast of a chaplain, and he also has a special.
Asterath, I've actually looked into the Blood Angels. Asterath only does 1. It's their other chaplain that does 2.
Okay, so that's Lamarties. But Asterath has a special ability that synchronizes really well with Death Company. Chris, if you want to pull him up on Wikipedia.
Am I pulling up?
Asterath.
Oh, you know what? He has 2 canticles marked on him. Maybe Asterath does it too.
Yeah, no, Asterath does a lot, but he also has a specific ability that also buffs Death Company. I just can't remember what it is right now.
I'm pretty sure it's reroll all hits.
There's something else that he does though.
Okay.
That's why I'll try and pull it up on Battlescribe.
I have it up on screen right now.
Yeah, it's the Massive Doom.
Yeah. Okay. That's not just Death Company. I thought that's everyone.
Yeah, but it synchronizes really well with Death Company.
Sure.
Yeah, like being able to add 1 to the hit roll on a 2 to a 5 and have a 4-up invul and add 1 to the hit roll on a 6. Like, yeah, you might take a mortal wound, which Death Company can shrug off, and this is going to look even better on them later on in the meta. But Asterath the Grim he's good. He does a lot.
Yep, he hits really hard too. The other 2 HQs in here are the Indominus Captain, who took Artisan of War, so it's Mastercraft Power Swords damage 3, and then a Librarian Dreadnought with Quickening and Wings of Sanguinius, and the Biomantic Sarcophagus, which gives him bonuses to cast the Blood Angels Discipline.
Yeah, I mean, that librarian dreadnought is going to kill whatever it touches, and it's going to be screened. Between incursors, intercessors, blade guards, death company, like there's a lot taking care of them.
All three of these characters can kill a unit of aggressors more or less on their own, which is pretty. Ashcraft might struggle a little bit with his D3 damage, but the other two both have flat 3 damage weapons with AP 3 or 4.
Yeah, they're going to delete whatever.
Yeah, it's going to melt them. The only thing that's like weird in here is the servitors, but I think he just had like 28 extra points.
So I actually want to talk about that in a second. So he took all incursor squads. For his
he took one intercessor.
One intercessor squad. Sorry, 2 incursors and an intercessor squad.
I'm surprised he didn't do assault intercessors, but I also understand the value of having the stalker bolt rifles.
Yeah, you're always going to end up with like 1 unit or 2 units that need to like sit on an objective in the backfield. We've been doing some testing, my friends and I, with Space Marines, and yes, assault intercessors are great, especially in the melee chapters, but even they want to have a couple of shooting units because something's going to need to sit on a backfield objective, and
and they got it.
Put a gun on it.
They got it.
So it can shoot. So 2 Blade Guard Vet squads, because they're excellent and they're really scary in Blood Angels because they can kill anything. We have like we said, that huge Death Company squad, which I think generally speaking is bad, except for exactly this meta where your opponent is going to have a bunch, like the best people, right? The best players, the scariest lists have these like huge squads of like mega durable things that you need to get into, like aggressors and things like that. It's also is a unit that forces you to overcommit. It kind of does the World Eaters thing where it's like if you leave the sergeant alive, it's just that sergeant is strong enough to like kill a unit by himself.
Yep.
And this is like, also a unit that's going to like try to charge through terrain so it can't be seen and get charges off on multiple enemy units to because 5 Thunderhammer Marines, you're just like you're going to overkill anything you touch. You're probably going to try and split your attacks.
Yeah. Well, so the other thing about this is I think this is really similar to the Blood Angels list that I was playing around with, because Outriders and Blood Angels are phenomenal. Like, run across the board, charge. We've already talked about how insane and cheap they can be. But the thing that I really liked about it was he brought in the Primaris Ancient. And I'm surprised he didn't do a Sanguinary Ancient because he does something similar and it also gives reroll 1s to wound. But I think the Primaris Ancient's a good call because now, as things die, because this list is throwing a lot of bodies at whatever, as things die, you're still going to be able to get those attacks off.
I also think that the Eradicators fall into a similar place where they're only good because of the Marine meta. I think generally speaking, you'd rather just have more OBSEC bodies if like the meta was like more sane. But because you're playing against a bunch of Marines, Eradicators are really good at killing Marines. So
yeah,
they kind of make themselves very good, even in Blood Angels, which don't necessarily do anything for them. Actually, which do literally nothing for them, but like, it's an Eradicator, so it's fine.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you do have to play to the meta, and having 3 sets of Eradicators makes a ton of sense. I think, hopefully, God, I hope this changes as the meta shifts to something that's a little healthier. We'll see a similar iteration of this list, but I think all those points the 360 points is going to go into more Outriders, Sanguinary Guard, something along those lines is what I see happening.
All right, shall we move on to 4th place?
Yep. I just wanted to touch on a comment in the chat here. Texas Barbecue 12 says servitors are such a sick choice for Space Marines. It's easy scramblers unit, and it's the cheapest wounds in the decks at 7 points per wound.
Sorry, yeah, I wanted to mention that. Thanks. Yeah. I think that servitors are definitely a big deal for Space Marines right now. They were really awful for a long time. But given the way the new secondaries work, you need to literally make units do nothing sometimes, and or throw units away. And like the cheapest Space Marine units are like 100-ish points. So, and then the servitors are like 30.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really good point in chat that the servitors do.
They do bring some values.
Servitors do things that nothing else in the Space Marine Codex does, which is be terrible. But like that, as much as a joke that is, like, yeah, they're terrible, but they're also pointed as a unit that is terrible, and there's nothing else in the Space Marine Codex that is pointed like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's basically their version of Chaos Spawn.
Exactly.
Well, Chaos Spawn are better, but I mean,
Chaos Spawn actually do things.
Yeah.
but don't have the infantry keyword like servitors do. So servitors can do a bunch of stuff. All right.
All right. Fourth place. Grey Knights.
Yeah. Speaking of servitors,
Grey
there's a
Knights.
bunch on this list.
Are there?
Yeah.
Holy shit! Yeah, there are.
So yeah, we brought,
when I saw this list, the only thing that
Wow.
stood out to me was, wow, that's a lot of strike squads.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of other things in here too.
Anyway,
this
so
is another list.
it's a Grey Knights battalion. Let's see. His HQs are the Brother Captain, a librarian, and Lord Caldor Drago. And then he brought 6 strike squads. I think they're 5-man strike squads. Yeah. A unit of paladins. How many is this? It's a lot. Was it 6 of them? I don't know. No, 10 of them. 9.
This is the 10-man squad.
10. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's 4 heavy weapon guys, 5, and then 6 demon hammers. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
And a warning
servitors,
state on the leader.
servitors, and then 2 Vendreads with a missile launcher and twin lays.
Yeah. Well, hang on. Servitors times 3. There's 3 units of servitors in this list.
Yes. So that's
and then,
that's all his fast attack is, just servitors.
Those are elites, I think.
Right?
They are.
Yeah, you can
There's
bring
a
6
lot of elites.
You can bring 6 elites in a battalion.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and then so actually, yeah, he brought all 6. He brought the paladins, 3 servitors, 2 venerable dreads, and both venerable dreads, by the way, are missile launcher twin las cannon with astral aim as their psychic power, so they can sit in a building and shoot through it or behind a building.
Wait, that's what that was?
Yeah, astral aim.
That's insane.
Astral aim is pick a unit, and that unit can ignore line of sight with their weapons. We're all used to seeing it happening on like bolter guys, but you can absolutely put it on like a land raider, or in this case, a dreadnought.
I'm
my
assuming
buddy,
he took the missile launcher because he couldn't double up on the twin lace cannon then.
Yeah.
They don't have the I don't know if they've they don't have access to forge roll dreadnoughts because all their dreadnoughts are psychers. And yeah, the forge roll ones aren't. Yeah, my friend who plays Grey Knights back when they were bad used to do this in 8th edition where he'd hide a quad las cannon land raider behind a building and just shoot at you with it until you were forced to commit to the field, and then he'd charge you with paladins. This is obviously 9th edition. We're going to play a little bit differently. This also here I want to point out there's a lot of decisions here that were very much made because of the Space Marine meta. Every single guy who's not shelling out for a Nemesis Demon Hammer has a pike. Pikes put you to strength 5, which is pretty much only good against toughness 4 targets. But Space Marines. And then every single squad's got a silencer in it, which is your special weapon that does the best against Space Marines.
Yeah, this is a Space Marines killer. Like if the Minotaurs chapter of Space Marines had an actual supplement, it would look a lot like this because they're just trying to kill Space Marines.
I actually suspect he's trying to sit on objectives with squads and force his opponents deep strikes and outflanks kind of away from his units by lightly committing to every objective with just like these little strike squads rather than having like huge units.
Yeah,
because half of his strike squads can teleport themselves and the other half and the other half like Vortex of Doom, which is that's not quite true. We got what? Gate of Infinity, Vortex of Doom, Purge Soul, Gate of Infinity, Gate of Infinity, Gate of Infinity. Okay, so 4 of the 6 can teleport themselves. One of them has Vortex, and then one of them's got like a random Mortal Wound power.
And they can't smite the way they did too, so having those powers helps.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are still just on smite because you can't cast Gate of Infinity 4 times a turn.
No.
But yeah, he's definitely looking at casting smite, maybe 3 or 4 times a turn. Obviously, towards the end, you're going to start failing. And then we have all those servitors to do actions and things like that.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty solid list, especially like this is what would you call it? A meta call?
Yeah, he's just like, oh, this is the option to kill Space Marines. Like, our missile launchers and twin las cannons is good, but they kill Space Marines really well. So here we are. Dreadnoughts are not excellent because you can just kind of murder them unless you can't see them because they're shooting through a wall.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm curious. So what I'm really curious about is how many Space Marine lists there were in the tournament.
What I'm very curious about is, did he ever have to have the misery of trying to beat that Nurgle list that he could never ever beat?
I'm gonna say no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say he didn't have to go up against that list.
Yeah. Every time he kills 9 beasts of Nurgle, they just come back to life, and that just sounds like a world I don't want to live in.
Yeah, it sounds horrible.
But that being said, this is a neat Grey Knight list. It's sort of a breath of fresh air. Like, yeah, technically they wear power armor, but they're a completely different army. They play totally differently. They've got different weapons in their squads.
You only had 2 traditional Space Marine lists in the top 4 this time, which was kind of nice.
Yeah, we're down to 50%.
Yeah, we're down, but we're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right. So let's
we're gonna sort of see is people are gonna just like go harder and harder into like just things that beat Space Marines until eventually we get ourselves out from under this.
Yeah, and then somebody's gonna bring something that is just the complete opposite of that, and just gonna
Or next month we get the new Space Marine Codex, and it just breaks Space Marines even more.
Shit, that is next month. Oh my god, where's the time gone?
Wow, that's gonna be terrible. And Necrons. Well, hopefully Necrons break the game a little bit. I would not be mad if Necrons are the new Space Marines in terms of meta breaking.
They're not gonna be. Let's be real.
We know, but like it would be nice.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the actual topic of this episode of the podcast, which is stratagems. Let's talk about how to best use your command points and how to best use your stratagems and trying to get your max value out of them, so that hopefully that you can win more games. I originally intended to start talking about this 15 minutes ago, but we got carried away talking about demons and Grey Knights because it's not Space Marines, so that deserved a bit of attention, I think. But yeah, so when we're talking about stratagems and command points and how you're going to try to build your army around those stratagems, I think the first step in that is determining, your army type. Does your army have the stratagems that really benefit where you're going to want that CP during the game to maximize the efficiency of your army and your dice rolling, or is that CP better spent on pre-game upgrades or, another detachment, or because like if you're playing Space Marines, you can spend a lot of CP before the game even starts, before you even think, oh, I can spend more CP to put things in reserve. You can buy as many relics as you want. You can, give sergeants mastercrafted weapons. You can upgrade damn near every independent character into a chief independent character, and give them all warlord traits. Like you start with 12 CP, you can burn through that real quick.
Yeah, and this is true for other armies too outside of Space Marines. We don't all have access to the million relics and extra things that Space Marines do, but most factions have 1 or 2 upgrades, and even outside of that, you can always bring in allied detachments, which for armies other than Space Marines means that you're bringing either like literal different units from other codexes, or maybe a better combination for your own codex, rather than having to spend a bunch of things on troops that you didn't want. You could bring a bunch of elites or something like that. So you're gonna have to kind of figure out and you're gonna have to do this through basically a bunch of playtesting. Like, are your units worth having worse command points for? Like are you willing to spend 3 command points to bring 4 heavy supports? Things like that.
Yeah, and part of it is also looking at your army stratagems in general and just seeing, like, is there anything actually worth it to use? Like, for example, I've been running a Death Guard list where I start out with 3 CP because I spent 3 of it on like relics and shit, and then I spent the other 6 on giving Defilers a 5-up feel no pain, because for that particular army list, there's really not too much that I want to spend on CP wise, because I don't have access to Demon Forge, so I'm not going to be burning a CP every turn for that, and I don't have like an advanced and charge stratagem that I know I'm going to want to use, and I don't have infantry to use Veterans of the Long War on. The things that I do want to use them on are, they're situational, and considering that I'm starting with 3 and I'm getting 1 back each turn after each turn, I still have that flexibility, but I'm not starving for CP, just because like it's part of my army construction and my overall game plan.
Yeah, versus when I'm running my custodies, I'll spend a couple CPs on a warlord trait and making someone a captain commander. But overall, I'm using my CP in the game. I want to make my terminators tough. I want to double shots when I can. I want to add AP or make sixes explode. Like my CP is going towards the game itself and buffing my already bonkers units.
Yeah. And then also recognize if decisions you're making are going to ultimately save you command points. So, for example, my Thousand Suns list, I run Abaddon in it, which actually gives me command points, not just because making him the warlord gives you command points, but he also makes you immune to morale, which is sometimes 2 or even 3 times fewer times per game in that I'm losing models to morale, and once per game I don't need to spend 2 CP to save a unit from morale. So even though he gives me 2 CP for being the warlord, he then really gives me 2 more CP for not having to ever use the same bravery.
Yeah, which is a very good point. So like, yeah, you got to take those kind of effects or auras into account as well. But once you've taken that into effect, once you've taken that into consideration, what you have to consider is recognizing what stratagems you have at your disposal. You know, once you've made that decision during your army construction, or you know, this doesn't happen like one after the other. This is a fluid process. But recognizing what rules you have at your disposal. There's basically 3 different types of stratagems, like the pregame stuff aside. There's first off your efficiency boosters, which are going to be things like Death to the False Emperor, Veterans of the Long War, or Demon Forge. There's your damage dealer type stratagems, which is like your orbital bombardment or whatever that like Necron triple croissant thing is.
Not that one. That one probably goes in the next category.
And then the last category are your rule breakers, which are like things like stooping dive if you play custodies, which is like nuts. Chaos familiar, you know, to swap out a psychic power. Fire and fade if you're playing, you know, your Perfidious Eldar. You know, those rule breaker type stratagems tend to be very powerful, but are also situational. Those are the stratagems that have a higher skill ceiling. You know, like when you're talking about like something that's an efficiency booster, like veterans, that's just +1 to wound. Like there's not a lot of thought going into using that. But if you're playing with Eldar and you're using Dark Reapers and you want to fire and fade, which fire and fade does is it lets you shoot and then you can immediately move afterwards. Well, you got to have it's very powerful, but you got to have a plan for that, because otherwise, 1, you're wasting a CP, and 2, you might be moving your Reapers into like an even worse position, you know? Yeah. After you've taken all of these things into consideration, I think the most important thing that you need to recognize when it comes to stratagems and command points is having a plan on how you're going to spend your command points, and how you're going to try to extract the most value out of each command point that you spend.
So I'll dive into this a little bit and go through it.
Before we do that, we do want to get to all the points, then we're going to go back and talk about having a plan, because I think we could spend the rest of the podcast talking about that.
About having a plan, yeah. So let me just go over these 2 points real quick, and then we'll loop back around and then talk about like how we're going to plan this out. So before you spend any CP, think about how many points it could give you or take from your opponent. So Benjamin, you actually wrote this point. Do you want to explain this one a little bit?
So don't spend command points on like random nonsense. Like, yes, you can spend command points to like win a fight somewhere, but like if that fight's in the corner of the table, there's like no objectives or secondaries at stake. Like, doesn't matter if your opponent's intercessors killed, you know, your Dark Reapers or like whatever in the corner of the table. If like there's some other place that you need to like pass morale to stay on an objective. And when I say some other place you need to pass morale to stay on an objective, I don't necessarily mean that turn, because like command points roll over. If you don't use them now, you will have them to use later. So really think before you spend command points. Does this actually help me win the game? Does this significantly help me win the game more than spending those command points somewhere else down the line? And similarly to you gaining points, taking points away from your opponent is functionally the same thing.
Right. Like, so if you're need to stay on an objective and you have obsec and like trying to just deny that from them, denial is just as good as scoring them yourself.
Absolutely.
The next point is being prepared to change the plan that you've set out at the beginning of the game if it means that staying on it, if you stay on it, that you're going to lose. Like it's one of those things where, like I used to box, and one of the things about boxing is everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. Well, if you don't get punched in the face, that means your plan is working. Keep going with the plan, because obviously it's working. You're not getting punched in the face. If you're winning, win more. You're obviously doing something right. Keep going. But you start getting punched in the face. Maybe you should take a step back and be like, why am I getting punched in the face? Oh, it's because my plan is dumb. My plan of just holding my arms out like this instead of, actually blocking is dumb. Maybe I should change my plan a little bit so I don't get punched in the face.
Yeah, and to build off of that too, generally speaking, your plan is something that's kind of safe and consistent. This is like your most consistent way of winning without taking major risks. And sometimes once you get into a losing position, you kind of have to make the decision. All right, am I just dead? In which case, probably keep going with the plan if it's in a tournament, just to rack up as many points as possible. Or do I need to make some like goofy like Hail Mary play to try and score a bunch of points that might also just like break my army in half if it goes wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it's not always necessarily about having a goofy Hail Mary plan. You might need a plan B. You might need to, when you're looking at your army, when you're thinking about things, it's like, what are the points of failure? What could this fail against? Where could this go wrong? And what do I do if it does?
Yeah, so the classic is the jump shoot jumping Dark Reapers. Opponent's got 3 Thunderfire cannons in their list. It's probably not worth to jump shoot jump them, because the second they step out of their transport, they're just going to die on the next turn no matter what you do.
Yep, you can fire and fade those Dark Reapers all you want, but 3 Thunderfire cannons, they're just going to reach out and touch those Reapers. It's not, like, are you forcing your opponent to use the Thunderfire cannons on your Reapers? Yes, but is it worth the CP to force them into doing that? Like 99% of the time, probably not. Is there a use case for where that's actually like the play? I'm sure that there is somewhere that like that's happened like at least one time in the last 30 years of Warhammer, but it's very rare. Okay. So I think we covered all of like the main points of talking about stratagems and command points. So do you want to loop back to the beginning of this and talk about how you'd want to start to formulate a plan?
Yeah. I want to actually start with looking back at those 3 types of stratagems and talk about which ones we're kind of building plans around and which ones we're not.
I mean, you don't know, but you don't. I think that's where I disagree. You don't build your plan around a stratagem. You build it. It's a mixed bag. I think you need to decide what's your win condition. Like what is your army going to do to win, and how is it going to win? And then you can start picking stratagems around certain units, because a lot of armies have stratagems that complement specific units. Sometimes it's this only works on Terminators, or this only works on Keyword. But sometimes it's, the stratagem works on all infantry, but like you're using it on a specific unit. So say Veterans of the Long War is a great example. You can use it on any infantry, but you're probably going to be using it on your obliterators.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. So like start off with like efficiency boosters. That's like a great example. Most of them work on anything, but you want to make sure that like you're not just like using Veterans of the Long War on 5 Bolter Marines when you could be using it on 3 obliterators that you're also spending command points on to shoot twice with.
Yeah, and likewise, you don't want to be using Demon Forge on like a Mauler Fiend when there's a perfectly good Lord Discordant that you could use it on, and you can make sure that you don't flub the wound roll on the Technovirus Injector. Like what happens every single time I don't Demon Forge my Lord Discordant.
Yeah, so the second one for damage dealers, most of these are actually very bad. GW just doesn't write stratagems that work, that like do mortal wounds or do damage like on their own without like enhancing a unit very well at all. These things like orbital bombardment, vortex missiles, demon shell, EMP grenades, none of those are things that you should be planning on using. You'll use them if you like a knight's in front of you with 1 wound left. You got some guy who can throw an EMP grenade. Like, great,
yeah, like you like I've used Demon Shell like on like a dude on my Chaos Lord who had like a bolt pistol, but that was because like there was something that was really strong in front of me with 1 wound left, and I was like, all right, on a 2-up, I'm gonna kill you with 4/1 CP guaranteed. All right, I'll take that.
But on the other hand, there's also things like Flying Headbutt, which you're using 100% of the time. That's the orc stratagem where they automatically explode one of their airplanes.
You use that on a burn Obama, it's 3 mortal wounds flat.
Yeah, it's 3 mortal wounds flat to like 5 or 6 units. It's completely absurd.
I mean, it's also like when you try to blow up your knight once it dies.
So, well, hang on, because it's different, because you may not have your knight in a position where like you're ready to blow it up. If you put a burn bomber in your list, you're putting it in your list because you want to flying headbutt it into your opponent's biggest grouping as early as possible. So your list does not have 11 command points. It has 10 command points and 1 set aside for flying headbutt. And you're not using that command point for anything other than flying headbutt, unless something goes incredibly wrong. Like the burn bomber gets killed turn 1, in which case it's not a very expensive unit. It's not the end of the world. Or like your opponent deploys in some insane way where like the burn bomber explosion is somehow not worth it. Which
so like the difference between the burn bomber and the knight is that the burn bomber is going to die. Like either it gets shot or you're using flying headbutt on it. The knight, ideally it doesn't die, but you're not planning to use the explode stratagem on your knight.
But the knight's going to want, if you're running multiple, and I'm talking in the 9th edition world, you're probably running multiple knights. One of those knights is going to die.
Right, but it might not die in like the right position. This is you could definitely be like, all right, I'm bringing this knight, and the plan with this knight is to throw it at my opponent and make sure it blows up in the middle of their army. That's less likely than the burner bomber strat, but you could certainly plan around it for sure.
You could plan around it. I just wouldn't recommend it.
So that's damage dealers. The other, I guess, damage dealer strat that you do plan around is like the Necron Scythe one. Although that one, again, you usually only put one command point aside because the 3 Doom Scythes don't tend to last very long.
No, because all you gotta do is take out 1 Doom Scythe and then no more Croissant Stratagem.
The stratagems that we tend to like really put into our list, like when I say put into your list, I mean like you're just like, I don't have 8 command points. I have 2 command points and 6 command points to do this thing, are your rule breakers. These are the ones that let you just do things that you're not normally allowed to do, and you're just like, I'm going to do this every game, and we're just going to like know that I'm spending the command points on this.
Yep.
Ones that you're going to use at the beginning of the game are less important for your plan. Like, yes, you're going to flying headbutt every game. When I bring the Cult of Magic in Thousand Suns, I'm always going to spend a command point to teach my Chaos Terminator Warlord how to cast Infernal Gateway. Yes, it's important to know that you're going to do that so you can kind of do it reflexively and not forget. But those are less important because those aren't command points you're going to like be like, oh crap, I really wish I had that one. Like, it's the beginning of the game. You have it. You're okay. The really most important turns to plan out with your command points are the end of the game. Like your last 2, sometimes 3 turns. If you're like, all right, these are the stratagems that like I know I need to use at the end of the game, and if I can't use them, my end game really falls apart. So
an example with what I do with my Blood Angels, and Chris can attest to this, is I have a blob of Sanguinary Guard or Death Company, and I always hold them off till turn 3. They're kind of that like, they're that scalpel that's also a hammer that goes wherever it needs to go, and I always keep some CP to give them that 3d6 charge and a reroll.
Yeah, because without that, they don't do anything.
Exactly. Like, but you always need to do that.
Yeah, so same thing with like Tau. This is more in 8th edition because I don't know how much I'm going to play them in 9th. Everyone cry a tear for Tau, please.
No tears for Tau.
Fair enough. I always had 4 command points left over for the last 2 turns because I knew that for the last 2 turns of the game, I was going to need a Branch Nova charge. And I knew that I was going to need to spend a command point to have one of my damage Riptides act at top profile. And if I could not do that in the last 2 turns, they were not going to have enough movement, and they were not going to have enough firepower, and they were not going to have enough durability for me to actually function in the last 2 turns of the game. And that Tau list had 6 command points, by the way. So knowing that I need to have 4 of them for the last 2 turns is super, super important. And this is what we mean by have a plan. Is like, know the things that you need at the end of the game that just like you don't function without them.
Mm-hmm.
And be aware of like And then also be aware of what you plan on doing at the beginning of the game so that your list actually works. Because if you're like, all right, I need like 4 command points at the end of the game for like some sort of like durability strat so I can last with my last couple of units of these 2 objectives, and then I'm going to spend 9 command points on my obliterators to like double shoot them a bunch, and with Veterans of the Long War with like, and then 3 more strat command points because I'm playing Iron Warriors and I want to reroll their profiles. Like, well, hang on. That's 17 command points. You bring any extra relics? Because you can't. You're out. So make sure that you are actually able to spend all the command points you want to spend. And then also, if that's the plan, know that you literally can't reroll a die. Like if you go to reroll a charge roll, now your end game doesn't work because you don't have that last command point for your durability strat or whatever it was you're going to spend it on.
Yeah, which is a very good point. You know, one of the things that I see in a lot of newer players is not planning ahead for the next couple of turns CP wise. So when it comes to like the 5th or the 6th turn, they can't do what they wanted to do because they wanted to re-roll some inconsequential roll in the 2nd or 3rd turn, where like it didn't really matter if they made that charge or not, but they just really wanted to do it because they paid the points for a choppy killy unit and they want them to go chop and kill. But it doesn't really affect the end state of the game. So it ends up being effectively a CP wasted.
As opposed to if I've got my Blob of Death Company dropping down and they're charging into an objective, and if they get there, they'll kill whatever they hit, then yeah, spending that CP on a reroll is important. Or dropping at 3d6.
Right, but I'm talking about just like having a unit of like 5 like scouts charging into a unit of Necron Scarabs. Like, who cares?
Yeah, it really goes down to like, well, hang on. Could you spend that command point to get more actual like game points later on?
Yeah, can you get actual game points? Can you get more value out of it somewhere? If not in like victory points, but like maybe you can get more value out of denying the other guy victory points. And if you want to like spend that TCP on Endless Cacophony to double shoot your obliterators and make sure that his unit that was going to score points doesn't exist anymore.
So the problem, like what the other thing we're missing though is we've talked about it conceptually. We've given some examples, but I don't think we're giving enough to how difficult it can be to plan around these stratagems. Like we all know, so Chaos is a good example. We all know that there are strategies you want to use, right? Veterans of the Long War, Endless Cacophony, assuming you're running Obliterator. But if you're building a Lord Discord, if you're bringing a Disco Lord, Chris, what are you going to spend on that Disco Lord?
Demon Forge.
What else? Would you pay for a relic?
I mean, it depends on the Legion, but like generally speaking, I'd pay for a Warlord trait.
Awesome. So when you're looking at something like a Disco Lord versus other units, you want to, when you're picking out your units, when you're putting together your list, you also want to start pairing stratagems with them. So what I really like to do is, and I'm going to use Blood Angels as an example because they're one that I actually spend a lot of CP on. So I usually bring some form of a captain, usually a slam captain, probably not going to be a slam captain. I think I do the Indomitus one, a librarian, and Lamartis. I know I'm going to spend a CP on the librarian to give him a warlord trait, to give him his special sarcophagus. I also know I'm going to make captain the warlord to give him stuff. So now that's why I'm down 1 CP. At the same time, I'm going to start parsing out CP to different units. I really like Sanguinary Guard and Death Company. And their stratagems, and like Sanguinary Guard has stratagems specific to them that make them either flat 2 or 3 damage, depending on the roll. So they can only do a minimum of 2 damage. They can shoot twice, if I remember correctly, with their AP1 guns that can do some work. And then the 3d6 charge. On top of that, I'm also going to be giving a bear carrier that standard of sacrifice because it just adds a little more. It gives everyone a little more of a boost. So right now, looking at my Blood Angels list, I already know how much CP I'm going to spend on various things. At the same time, if I personally like to put things in Deep Strike, but if for whatever reason I decide to put my Death Company on the ground, I'm also going to be spending CP on moving them before the game. So I'm constructing this list. I've constructed this list around units that I want, win conditions that I've agreed on with myself. And the win condition being the Blood Angels one of charge everything, take objectives, hold it with bodies, hold it by being scary, and then deep strike when you can. But I've already pre-spent most of my CP there. I think I have like 2 points or 3 points of discretionary CP at that point. After that, so you want to start pairing your stratagems with specific units, and you want to decide, and you want to make this decision with yourself. Who do I want to use transhuman physiology on? My Death Company or my Sanguinary Guard?
Yeah, that's one way of doing it. Yeah, I do a similar thing with figuring out how I want to spend command points during a game. I guess to like look at the list that I've been playing around with, the Thousand Suns list. Another thing that kind of comes up to there. Yeah, exactly. Like Prince Commander says in chat, like Tyranids is going to spend 6 to 8 command points on their Hive Guard unit. Absolutely. You probably want to put aside 10 command points for that unit and just be like, yeah, these 10 command points are to double shoot it, and I can get them back if something happens to that unit and I don't get to double shoot it. But until then, that's what those command points are for, because that's how I win the game. If that unit is on the table double shooting at the end of the game, you're probably winning.
Yeah, I think it goes back to knowing what you want to spend your command points on, like turn by turn.
Yeah,
like if you go back to 8th edition, and you go back to Thunderfire cannons, you know you're spending CP on Tremor Shells and Suppression Fire, like at the very least for 2 turns. You know, so when you got your list and you've got like 11 CP or 12 CP or whatever, how many CP is, you already know you're down 4 CP. Because you're using those two stratagems, the first 2 turns.
Yeah, I can't even tell you how many games I've won against Space Marine players because we got to the last turn and they've run out of command points to Tremor Shell one of my units. And it's like, well, shouldn't have double shot with the Thunderfire cannon, or you shouldn't have, commander rolled a charge that like wasn't quite getting you anything. It's just because of my, if my like random intercessor couldn't move at full speed to get onto that objective, I'd probably be losing right now. And I think actually it's also a good point to point out back with like planning units with especially with like Hive Guard. There are units that are just designed that they're not efficient without command points. Hive Guard's one of those units. 6 Hive Guard, it's not a very good unit. 6 Hive Guard that can double shoot every turn is an insane unit. So you want to really be looking at like your command point plan and your units and just being like, do any of these units just like not function without command points? And if so, do I have enough command points to go to all of my units that need command points? So a great example, like the Thousand Suns, Scarabocult Terminators are incredibly durable without command points. Rubric Marines can have some real durability issues if you are not willing to spend command points to give them bonus and vulnerable saves. So like my Thousand Suns list, I have 1 20-man unit of Rubric Marines and 2 10-man Scarabacults because you can't spend the same stratagem more than once a turn, and they all take the same stratagem, so I can't protect both units at the same time. And even if I could, I just literally wouldn't have the command points. I'm starting off with 8. I pretty much am always going to spend 1 to 4 deploy those Rubric Marines down to 7. Game is 5 turns. I need to give a unit +1 on the vulnerable saves every turn. So I have 2 command points plus the 1 command point per turn, plus whatever command points I get back from my command farming relic. To Veterans of the Long War, Thousand Suns have a sit still and double shoot stratagem to learn new psychic powers, and that's not a lot of command points. So you got to be like really aware of like, when do I need to stop spending?
Yeah, it's very easy to start spending command points and not know when to stop, because I know when I first started playing, some of the advice that was imparted to me was you should try to be out of command points by the 3rd turn, which when you're coming from a point of like hoarding all your command points because maybe you want to make a charge or make a re-roll a morale test, and you end up ending the game with like still a handful of command points. Yeah, having command points on the table is bad, but on the other hand, spending all of your command points by turn 3 and not having plans to be in that position is arguably equally as bad. Mm-hmm. Now there's also there's the train of thought that, yeah, you should plan to spend all of your CP in 3 turns because you want to, get all your force multipliers out there as soon as possible, so that when your opponent uses his force multipliers, he's not multiplying as big a force. So, like, you'll win the war of attrition that way, which is well and good, and that's how you should treat your stratagems, as force multipliers, because that's what they are. They're your army's cheat codes. But on the other hand, like I said, you got to have a plan for that. If you're just pumping out, like, spending command points wherever you can just to boost efficiency, on whatever, like you're spending a CP on Veterans of the Long War for a 5-man bolter squad, I mean, yeah, you're boosting the efficiency there and you're multiplying your force with that unit, but are you really getting the most value out of that? No, you're not. Which is why, if you're gonna spend all your command points by turn 3, have a plan to do it efficiently and effectively to extract the most amount of value out of it. And when I'm talking about that, we're going back to the example of the obliterators. I'm saying use Veterans of the Long War on the obliterators, and then use Endless Cacophony. Don't shoot with the obliterators and then do vets and then endless, because you just wasted a turn of shooting without +1 to wound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think talking about efficiency and force multiplication kind of comes down to, if you have a most efficient stratagem, but you can only use it once per turn or once per phase, usually once per turn. You should probably be aiming to use it every turn of the game. So definitely put command points aside to use it every turn of the game. I'm going to keep going back to Thousand Suns. +1 on invulnerable saves for Rubric Marines is fundamentally broken, and I should be using this every turn. And yeah, I could do other things to get more damage out of my army earlier in the game, but ultimately that means I'm not doing the best possible thing the maximum number of times. So yeah, just make sure that, like, whatever thing is the best thing in your army, you can do it like the most possible times that makes sense in the game. And don't run out early because you weren't paying attention. You lost, you saved morale on a unit that you could have afforded to lose some guys off of.
Yeah. When we're talking about efficiency boosters, you can maximize the efficiency. You can boost the efficiency of a unit by like 200%, but 200% times 0 is still 0. Like, if you're going to boost the efficiency of something by 200%, would you rather boost the efficiency of a unit that's going to output, as an abstract example, 10, or you want to boost the efficiency of a unit that's going to output 5? Obviously, you're going to do it on the 10 because you only pick one of them.
I think the next sort of important thing to talk about is, like, your opponent is going to have a plan as well. It's not just us who have plans for trying to figure out how we're going to win the game. Most armies require command point plan. Not all. Some armies just are a bunch of efficient units that don't need to operate on any sort of command point plan. Looking at you, 8th edition Iron Hands. I shamelessly played that army, and you only needed to think about 3 of your command points, and it was part of the reason that the army was so silly. But generally speaking, your opponent is going to have a plan, and recognizing what their plan might be and then how to abuse it is pretty significant.
That's why you need to always factor in how your list can lose and how you can prevent those losses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with your opponent's plan for CP, this is also why things like a plan generations in the making and Agents of Vex are simultaneously so powerful and so reviled.
Yeah, for sure. Preventing people from boosting offensive or defensive things when they thought they needed it can be a real disaster. This is also why things like Calidus Assassins and the Alpha Legion thing that I always forget, Scream of the Hydra?
Hydra's Whale.
The Alpha Legion. Hydra's Whale, yeah. Things that force your opponent to spend extra command points are really scary because, like I said, my list has 7 command points to spend. If I spend 4 of them, then my opponent goes, all right, I'm going to double your command point costs per turn or whatever. That's really scary because now I need to figure out, my plan fundamentally needs to change, because if I go ahead and use my allocated stratagems, I'm going to actually run out of command points before the end of the game.
Yep. So a great example of that is I was playing an Alpha Legion list versus a Gene Stealer cult army, which, if you know Gene Stealer cults, they they need CP to run. And I had the Hydra's relic and I activated it. And the first turn, I forced that Gene Stealer cult player into spending 4 more CP than he wanted to that first turn. Because I just
gross.
Yeah, no, it was really gross. I ended up like just pigeonholing him into a position that he did not want to be in and did not have the CP to get out of.
And even if you're not playing Alpha Legion, or any other factions that have stratagems like that or abilities like that can force you to spend extra command points, you can still force your opponent to spend extra command points. Charge with 2 killer units, almost murder a unit and leave a couple guys left in it. Like if they counterfight or heroic bravery, not heroically intervene, insane bravery, that's command points that are out of their plan. At the same time, make sure that you actually understand what their plan is, because if they just had the command points to spend and you're just throwing away units for nothing, that's disaster. But yeah, if you're like pretty sure, like, oh yeah, they need those 2 command points to, I don't know, make that Riptide move at top profile on the last turn, well, that means he just can't save that unit with morale. I get to just attack it and just like either watch it run away or watch his plan fall apart. So yeah, be aware, like when your opponent has 5 command points left, like sometimes they don't. It just looks like they do, but like they know where those 5 command points are going, which means that like you're kind of free to just kind of wreak havoc on that plan and force them to deviate from it. Which can, like we said, their plan is to use the most efficient thing the most number of times. You're just decreasing their efficiency whenever you force them to spend command points the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, one way you could look at it is if you force your opponent into spending command points in reaction to what you're doing, you can view that as effectively taking command points away from them. Because like you said, when you're down to like those 5 command points, you probably got a plan for how you're going to spend each one of those command points. And then you shoot off enough of my units shoot off enough of my models from a particular unit that it's on an objective. And, like say they're cultists and they've got really shitty leadership. Well, damn, I might have to spend 2 CP on Insane Bravery now, And if I've only got 5 CP left, well, then that leaves me with 3 CP. That really starts limiting my options and starts putting me in the corner.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where, just to that point, to crystallize it, if your opponent's trying to counter what you're doing, they're on the defense, and if they're on the defense, you're winning.
Yeah, a lot of people complain about morale penalty abilities because like, oh, they don't do anything. Your opponent just spends 2 command points. Well, that's something.
That's huge. That's huge. That's why I was big on Night Lords, because like every 2 CP that I force you to spend, that's 2 CP you're not using to like boost the efficiency of your shooting against me.
Yeah,
and that's 2 CP you can't put into transhuman physiology and space marines.
All right. Anything else to touch on this topic?
No,
I think we've covered it pretty well. Like if we had to recap, I would say that you need to decide which stratagems you're going to build around. Identify which stratagems really make your army tick. Identify the units that can make the best use out of those stratagems, and formulate a plan to effectively spend your CP. Obviously you don't got to plan it out every single, all 6 rounds, but you should at least have like a roadmap to there. You're not going to say like, oh, I'm going to spend, 3 CP on these particular stratagems on, so I can advance onto an objective on, turn 5. No, you're getting really into the weeds there. But, those first, at the very least, the first 2 turns, you got to have a really solid plan for how you're going to max out your CP usage. And then, just try to think about how to effectively spend your CP so that you can get yourself more victory points or deny your opponent victory points if you're not using it to boost efficiency. Ideally, there would be an intersection there and it would do both at the same time. And if you can't do either, try to think of a way where you can force your opponent into spending his CP in reaction to something that you are doing. Is that a fair recap?
Yeah, and just make sure that you're not going into a game planning on spending more command points than you actually have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like personal finance. Don't spend more than you have, which is really hard, but
You got to do it.
got to do it. All right. Is there anything else that you guys want to touch upon before we sign off on this episode of the pod?
I think that's it.
Likewise.
All right. So, everybody, thank you very much for listening to this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd like to thank our contributors for this episode, Omar, even though you were late, and Benjamin. This has been the 3D6 Charge podcast. We are live on Twitch every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern at Twitch TV/3D6 Charge. Follow and subscribe, please. We're also anywhere you can find podcasts like Spotify, iTunes, Google Pods, Podbean, or just wherever you get podcasts. Follow there. You'll never miss an episode. We will also have this up on YouTube tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. And hopefully I should be able to spend parts of this podcast episode into a standalone, more condensed YouTube video about planning out your stratagems and such. But in any case, this has been the 36 Charge podcast. Bye for now, and don't roll any ones.